Hello and welcome back to Azure Terraformer. Today we have a code review, a little bit of a code review and a help. So a viewer has reached out to me. He's experiencing a problem with the Azure Virtual Machine extension, and it's throwing some errors, and he isn't sure what's going on. So here's what he said to me. He said, "Hi, currently working on configuring a self-hosted agent for ADO." I call that AZDO because I'm old school .NET, old school Microsoft developer, and ADO has different connotations to me. So I've never been a fan of when people call Azure DevOps ADO. That's just me. So I always do AZ, which to me is like the universal prefix for Azure. So AZDO. So anyways, configuring a self-hosted agent for AZDO on Azure Terraform. However, I encountered an error during the configuration process and would appreciate your assistance in resolving the issue. Error code is VM extension provisioning error. He says, "I've already verified that the script works manually, but when executing it through Terraform, I encounter the mentioned error. I suspect this might be an issue with how I'm defining the script or passing variables in the Terraform configuration. Thanks." Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your code and providing the GitHub URL so I could easily clone your repo and check it out for myself and for you and for all the viewers out there. If you want me to review your code or you need help, feel free to DM me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Mark Tinderholt. Pretty easy to find. Please follow me there and send me a DM and include your GitHub URL, and I'll go clone your repo and make one of these videos to help you out. Anyways, I pulled this friendly internet stranger's code, and I've kind of set some things up so I'm ready to start using it. And so let's just dive into the code and kind of look and see what we got here. So I can see right off the bat, he's using a number prefix to kind of keep the order of the Terraform files in an order that I think makes sense to the original author. And the convention is inconsistently applied, in my opinion, because we have some files that do not have the number prefix and some that do. So tiny little nit, but I'm with you. Like I get the OCD of having your files in a certain order. If you think about things in a certain way, and like this begat that, that begat this, you want to see those files in a certain order. Makes sense to me. I would just say, if you're going to follow a naming convention, probably want to stick to it. That being said, I don't particularly like this naming convention pattern, so I don't follow it. The number prefix is what I'm talking about. As I've discussed on previous videos, I use more this naming convention here with the variables.tf, versions.tf. And then main.tf. Of course, providers.tf is kind of OG Terraform, if you will. I call it versions.tf now. Number one, to keep it down with that variables.tf file. They both start with V. They tend to hang out together. They tend to be kind of the entry point files, in terms of they keep your provider configuration and they keep your input variables. And then it doesn't mix in your provider configuration if you happen to be having file names of resources that you're provisioning that happen to start with a P or between P and B. Weird English stuff, right? So English speakers problems here. Anyway, so main.tf, M, it's a wonderful letter of the alphabet. I know it and cherish it well. And it's smack right in the middle, which is kind of where main should be, right? So I'm a big fan of this, and it looks like he's using main, the original author is using main just like I would, to a certain extent, in that, this is where we use globally scoped resources across this entire module. So this would be any data source that you're going to reuse over and over again across multiple files. This would be any kind of keystone resource, that keystone in the bridge where you pull that thing out and the whole bridge collapses. That's kind of what I'm talking about. In Azure, that's typically the resource group that you're provisioning resources into. Yet I see that he's included that in, the big 00- file, which makes sense. It's almost like we've got main and then we've got son of main, which is 00 dash. I'd probably just kind of merge these two together and have my resource group declared in there, right? So right off the bat, this kind of makes sense to me. I do like the Terraform, that he's got his versions block, he's got his provider block. I would recommend, and as I always do in root modules, using the squiggly arrow to target a specific version of your providers. That way, if you're managing these resources over time, which you should be, using your Terraform code and using a backend state to maintain Terraform state, in most situations, you don't want to have surprises. And so using this greater than or equal basically means, hey, if there's a new version of the provider, just use that, right? Any version of the provider. So this is going to basically implicitly take any new version of the provider that's out there, which, spoiler alert, sometimes there's breaking changes between versions of the provider. For example, if the next time this original author runs Terraform apply, the latest version of the provider is 4.0 for Azure RM, there's probably going to be a lot of change, right? And it may not end well, right? So these can of course be avoided by using Terraform plan, analyzing your plan, but it's generally good practice in a root module to use a specific module. That way you have to explicitly upgrade the provider, which that should be a ritual. Like, okay, team, are we ready to upgrade the provider? I can't emphasize that enough. So that's something that I'd probably change there. Let's look at variables. Okay. We got a lot of variables here. And it might make more sense for me to look at the TFRs file here. So the TFRs file is pretty interesting. I like the consistent naming convention of the resources. We've got mo, dev, ADO as kind of a prefix. Now, here's where this is more of a module design consideration. When you're designing the interface for your module, and anytime you create a Terraform project, you're creating a module. It just happens to be the root module, but you are creating a module. And so you need to think about what the interface should be for the outside world. And so this is a perfect example, and I think it's beautiful. Just look at this, highlighting the resource group name, you can see where we could immediately simplify the interface to this module by extracting this string, mo, dev, ado, out as an input variable in and of itself. And then the rest of these suffixes would then just be hard-coded in their respective places. And we don't need all of these input variables declared within our project. And then it will make a much more cleaner setup. So that would be something that I would do. Next, so we're looking at that. Okay, I think we're moving along here. Mo ADO. Okay, so object reference names are looks like we're embedding the application name, within the resource name. I wouldn't recommend doing that either. It's kind of a nit. You could, but when you give a resource an object name, if you change that object name in the future, it will do a drop create. And so you want to have object references to be, I guess, specific, but also general, kind of in the middle. You don't want them overly specific, where they become super redundant, right? But you also want them to be relative. And so relative meaning we already know that the name of an input is basically setting the context for this module to be mo ADO, right? Now I could instantiate a new copy of this module for a completely different application. But I don't want references to Mo ADO in there. Maybe I want it to be Mark ADO, right? Or Bob ADO, or Jim ADO, right? Having the application name or the environment name embedded within object references is gonna basically kind of mix things up a little bit and make the Terraform code less reusable. So I highly recommend taking into consideration the context of the module that you're in. What input variables are you passing in? Do those input variables give that context of like what the application is, what the environment name is, or what the environment is, dev, prod, whatever, right? If it doesn't, I mean, there are some situations where you have specific environment things that get turned off or turned on based on the environment, in which case that makes sense. You just need to assess the context of the module to give it a proper name. And in this particular case, Mo ADO is embedded in all of these different, all of the names of all of the resources, right? And we're probably going to extract this out, and I would probably extract dev out to be the environment name. So let me add that as well. Rationalize dev prefix as the I just noticed that dev was embedded in there, right? So concatenating the application name, the environment name, Mo ADO dev gives us a very consistent way of establishing context of all of the resources. So I'd probably rename this resource to be relative to the module that it's in and taking in the context that the module already has within itself. And in this case, the single resource group that you're deploying, I would just call it the main resource group. And so that's probably what I would name this. And if you watch my other videos, I'm sure you're going to see that I name the primary resource group, the only resource group. I just call it main. Moving on. So now we have a virtual network that we're creating and a subnet. And we see kind of some of the similar things happening here. Some of that context is being redundant. We have the ADO agent VNet. We have the subnet for the ADO agent. And I think in this situation, just like the resource group, I would rename these object references to remove those redundant contextual items, like the fact that this project is, for setting up a dedicated virtual network for our ADO agents, right? That's what this module is about. And this module will only provision one virtual network. Then I would probably just I would just rename the VNet to be the main VNet, because there's only going to be one VNet, and call this main. And then you can also see, using very strategic object reference namings, relationships between the resources within the project. The resources have different types. They share the same object reference name because they share the same purpose, right? So they kind of intertwine together because they are related. They just happen to be a different type. This project is the Mo ADO dev environment, and it has a main resource group and it has a main network. If we go provision another copy of this module for the Mo ADO prod environment, then we would have the prod environment would have a main resource group and it would have a main virtual network. Again, relative to the module, relative to the deployment, the environment that you're deploying. So then the subnet here, and subnet naming, I think, is a little bit different in that you kind of want to plan for the future a little bit, right? So the purpose of the subnet, you almost never have just one subnet, right? Within a VNet. So you very often want to go a little bit of a different direction with subnet resource object reference naming. You want it to be very specific because there are so many different bits that get flipped, which will cause you to add additional subnets. So you very much should be purposeful about your subnet name, unless you have a very, very specific use case, or this is like a lab environment, you're never going to ever change anything about it, or you don't care about it, then who cares, right? Then I would probably just also call this main or default or primary or something like that, and just let it go. So yeah, so I would probably also change the name here as well. Now Key Vault, okay, so Key Vault, we're generating a random password. Which is I think going to be used later in our secret, okay? And it looks like this is probably a password that's going to be used for a VM. That's what I'm guessing. So we're creating a secret. Again, I think the naming conventions. And then I'd probably kind of group the password down with the secret that's provisioning it. And I might even break that into a different file. Key Vault is kind of a special case in my mind, where the Key Vault kind of stands on its own, and there's access policies that are related to the Key Vault. But then Key Vault is kind of a place where you put secrets and certificates and other things, right? But those secrets are basically, they have a twin equivalent. In this case, it's a random password that we're generating. But it could be, something that's output from, like a resource, like a blob storage access key or a Cosmos DB access key or something like that, where we are tying it to a resource that's generating that secret value. In this case, a random password, but it could be other resources. And so in that case, I usually like to have my secret, because of that twin kind of shadow relationship, I usually like to have the secret declared next to wherever that password is being generated, or wherever that secret is being generated. So I'd probably regroup the password with the secret. Key Vault, we have, we're making use of that current tenant. We're using inline access policy. I would highly recommend not doing this. The problem with that is you can, there's two ways of provisioning access policies in Key Vault. You can do it as a nested block within your Key Vault resource, or there's a totally independent resource called that Key Vault access policy, Key Vault access policy, that you can set up independent of your Key Vault resource. And I would highly, highly recommend always using that resource for the access policy and never use the blocks. Here's why. They're mutually exclusive. Once you use the block, you can't then add a resource, right? And clearly this access policy is being created by the original author because it's granting access to the Terraform user, right? Which is, as we've discussed in my Key Vault videos, very, very important for Terraform to be able to manage the Key Vault, right? But in this case, you're kind of breaking your own kneecaps in the future to allow other managed identities, service principals, user groups, etc., that may need access to this Key Vault. You're going to have to update this particular Key Vault block in order to grant those things access to it. And the tricky bit of this is, if you want to migrate to that, you're going to have to remove this access policy block that's nested in here, and then create a new resource that grants the same permission. But what's that going to do? Next time you're on Terraform Apply, Terraform will probably be able to remove that access policy. There's a little bit of a race condition where it's trying to remove its own access to that Key Vault. but it may be trying to talk to the different sub-resources, like secrets in this case, that it had access to previously. So you can run into lots of like hairy situations, trying to navigate that. So it's absolutely best practice when working with Azure Key Vault and Terraform to separate those access policies out. Make sure you think through your depends on clause to make sure that when you declare secrets or other resources that are dependent on the access policy, you declare those depends on within your code to make sure that the Terraform user has access that it needs to the Key Vault before Terraform goes and tries to create those resources. So there we go. Very important stuff here. Okay, other than that, nothing else to see here. Let's go look at our VM. Okay, so in our VM, we have a pip, we have a NIC, we have a virtual machine. Again, we have the naming convention thing going on here. I'm not going to judge on the use of a pip, and I mean, this is not the most secure way to set up an Azure DevOps Build Agent. Usually when people are setting up their own custom Azure DevOps Build Agents, it's because they want them on a private network. Future video coming on that, bear with me. So I won't judge on this. This is fine. If we clean up the naming conventions, in our input variables, this would, get very, very simple very quickly. So this would rationalize down a lot. What do we got? We're just using a Bravo class, and we're using an OS disk name and from a variable. And then we're just using Ubuntu 18.04, which is out of service. Like, you should not be using 18.04. You got to upgrade to 20.04 or 22.04. So just as an FYI, like 18.04 is out of service now. And we are using that random password, which is interesting because usually Linux machines, you're not using password auth, you're using SSH auth. So that would be one thing that I recommend doing is don't use password auth. Maybe that's a requirement of VSTS. Maybe VSTS, because he, like the original author, wants to use this as an Azure DevOps build agent. That may be a requirement there. So I may not know that. Okay. And so, here is where we're getting to the fun stuff. We've got our virtual machine extension. We're using a custom script, and we're actually base 64 encoding the contents of this file. And this file is right there. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So we're gonna have to go check out that later. So far, so good. I don't see any problems right off the bat here. NSG, we're allowing SSH, and all that jazz. Okay. So, yeah, again, it's probably same thing, same naming conventions is a thing, and it's something that I would do. I don't know what this source prefix is. Maybe that was their IP address, the original author's IP address, and they just changed it before they committed to GitHub. That'd be my guess. Okay, so let's go look at the script. So we're doing quite a bit of things. We are making a directory. We're downloading a package. This looks like Microsoft official bits for a build agent. This mod dev thing, multi-line double quotes seems a little scary right now. This looks really nasty to me. I'm not so sure about this, but of course I'm not like the bash wizard guy, right? So mod dev -c unattended, looks like there's some oddities going on here where we're using this syntax here, AZP agent name, and this looks like Terraform syntax here. And then it looks like we've got host name in here. And I'm not sure what's going on here. This does not look right to me at all. So maybe they think they're using a template file and they're passing this stuff in here. But I didn't see that. I didn't see that at all. So I'm not quite sure where that value is coming from, unless that's part of this. Well, no, that's an input variable to this config.sh. So like this should be this environment variable would need to exist. I don't know if this environment variable exists. And then we got this host name here, and that just looks, I have no idea where that's coming from, right? So this looks a little dicey. Is this what did I do? Is this anywhere in the project? No. Yeah, this is the only reference to that thing. So let's check host name. Yeah, I don't know where the original author thinks these are coming from, but yeah, this I think this is where the issue is right there. So also you don't need to run things in sudo. When a virtual machine extension is running its custom script, it's running things in sudo. So like you don't have to do this. So the script, even these su, I'm not sure like why it looks like he's switching user to this modev like person user. I don't think you need to do that. You could probably just run this config script and have it go. So that would be what I would the changes that I would make to the script file. Yeah. So yeah, that's it for my code review. We'll probably look deeper at getting this working in my next episode. But I hope you enjoyed the commentary that I had about my friendly internet stranger's code today. Again, we're just kind of checking things out and seeing what the problem might be at a cursory level. Next episode, I'll dig in here and try and get this thing running. So hope you found this useful, and if you did, please smash that like button and consider subscribing to my channel. Really work hard to try and earn your subscription, and it really helps out the channel if you subscribe. So please subscribe, and when you do, ring that bell so you know when my next video drops. Got a lot of good stuff coming here on the Azure Terraformer. That's it for me. This is the Azure Terraformer signing off.